noticed at the previous talk that you guys are taking pictures of the slides. Don't worry, you can take, no issues. But if you miss any, we will actually be sending all the participants a PDF of the slides that we shared earlier as well. So don't worry, okay, if you miss taking anything out. Okay, gentle reminder, headphones can you switch off? Okay, and also that photos and videos will be taken of you guys at the event, so this FYI. Okay, so
yeah.
okay. So my colleague Juliet, who was the head of the community engagement team, will start the sharing for our NODA. So let's have a big welcome for Juliet.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon. I hope you had your lunch. You might be a bit sleepy, so bear with me. Okay, sleepy, right? Okay. Okay, for those who are coming for the next few day sessions, if you need a caffeine injection, there is a machine downstairs, and also there is fun toast over there, though I don't personally recommend it. Okay, because I'm very fussy about my Nanyang coffee. Okay, so do bring your own coffee if you feel you need a very good shot. Okay, so thank you all for your interest in No One Dies Alone program. So this session will be presented by myself and Tian Xin. So we'll start off the program by bringing you all through the journey of how NODA is being done in Assisi, okay? And we also hope through this sharing, you'll be able to bring it back to where you are helping with. Okay, so let me try. That's good. Okay, never mind, I try. Okay, so what is No One Dies Alone program? It is a volunteer-centered program. The program, all the people who provide vigil, companionship are all volunteers. Okay, they provide companionship to the patients that we care for in Assisi Hospice. Our patients are dying, who have neither family or close friends to accompany them in their final hours so that they do not die alone. So let me start off by introducing to you this gentleman. This gentleman, please meet Mr. Tay Cheng Tian. Mr. Tay is 52 years old. He had cancer and was admitted to Assisi Hospice on 19 September for palliative care. This cancer is mostly associated with factors like smoking and alcohol consumption. Later you will see how that played out. And he had tumors that had spread around his neck and lymph nodes, obstructing blood vessels. Like a lot of cancer patients, he had chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and it did stop working for him. So he came into Assisi Hospice, inpatient, for us to help him manage his disease symptoms. So when Mr. Tay came to the Assisi space, what happens here is that our care for every single patient is through a multidisciplinary team. And there's this thing called the NODA referral. So at our weekly meetings, that is by the clinical team, okay, the clinical team deliberate over the care of our patients. And Mr. Tay came up, and then it was, so they look through his profile, his support, his ecosystem, and that is when the team finds that he will benefit from NODA program. So the NODA referral criteria are patients who have no family or friends, patients who have limited support, estranged family, or has elderly spouse and sibling. Okay? So when we first started NODA, it was actually for patients with no family or friends. As we progress our program, we find the limited support become more and more pronounced among our patients. That is part of program development. So we look at it, and importantly is we look at the need of the community. Okay, so at like all programs, we need to have that in mind. So what do we do next when we identify a patient who needs it? So Mr. Tay needs it. Okay, he's likely to be quite lonely. So what happens next is that the social workers, the MSW, will first seek his consent to be on the NODA program. So it is not a directive, it is an invitation. An invitation to, would you like to have companionship? So that is what will happen once the clinical team identify Mr. Tay for this program. And only upon the acceptance of the referral, like Mr. Tay say, yes, I would like companionship. Then will the clinical team, the MSW, inform the volunteer team that, hey, there is this patient that will you consider accepting as a NODA patient? So that is the process. So usually, so the VM team, the NODA team, we can hold as many as 5 patients at any one time for the program. But please bear in mind, our patients all pass on at different times. But what does that mean? It means that we start to build friendship. Once the referral comes in, Mr. Tay's referral came in, we start to build friendship with Mr. Tay. So that is Jackie with Mr. Tay. And we start befriending, getting to know the patient well. And what happens is that all the volunteers in the team will write notes about what they have communicated with Mr. Tay. Like what does he like, what does he not like, what does he prefer to be called by, etc., etc. Okay? So, for Mr. Tay, the NODA volunteers highlighted his love for smoking, appreciation for friendly companionship, and wish to try premium durians. Very Singaporean, huh? Must have hope to eat Mao San Wang. There's a lot of joy for a lot of people, including me. Okay. So when we build friendship in any hospice setting, in palliative care, what is very, very important is that we always try to honor the patient's preferences, right? So sometimes I get funny, I get shocked face, you know. People say, huh? Your patient can smoke? Then we're like, yes, they can smoke. We are not here to, you know, they are terminally ill patients, right? You know, you want me to go and tell them, hey, you got to quit smoking today. Okay. That's not what we do, okay? We don't indulge them, but we hear their preferences, all right? So for Mr. Tay, the clinical team, not us, okay? The clinical team say that, okay, he can smoke 4 times a day, okay? But you know, we are a hospice. How are we going to spare a nurse to bring Mr. Tay down for a smoke? Cannot, right? No way, right? Huh? People will kill us, right? So what happened? We know that he likes to smoke there. That's our koi pond, if you have a chance to look at it. And because Mr. Tay has a sister who is unable to visit regularly, the NODA volunteers actually were the ones who will accompany him to his smoke breaks. Remember his 4 smoke breaks, huh? Poor NODA volunteer got to stay away from the second-hand smoke 4 times a day. But truly, that's what happens in the hospice, all right? And it is very important because our nurses have to look after the patients. So that's when volunteers come in and honor his preference, okay? So maybe sound familiar to many of you. Then remember what they found out about him, right? He also have the thing that he liked that I also like. So it's called a taste of heaven. Okay, so the volunteers are very, very sweet. Okay, look, his taste of heaven was when the volunteers, okay, very guai, the volunteers, they all sought permission first. Hey, because someone very strong, the smell, right? So they sought permission first. Then they were able to bring in, we hide him at one corner of the garden so we don't gonna complain from other patients. Alright? And so he get to enjoy his Mao San Wang. And do you know that he never had Mao San Wang before? Oh, you're shocked, huh? You all remember Mao San Wang can go up to $26 per kg. Okay, and sometimes it is quite expensive for some people. Okay? Those were the days. Now someone might be a bit lower, price tag. Okay, so that is what is all part of befriending, honoring, and you know what we like to do, right? We like to make them happy. Okay, we like to add life to days to the patient. But Mr. Tay, his condition continues. I mean, though he's very happy lah, he get to smoke, he get to eat mangsang, but it still means that his body is breaking down, right? So that's one thing we must always remember in caring for palliative patients, and that is our patients continue to weaken. Okay, the most ideal scenario is that they don't look like it, but in your eyes, but their body is still breaking down. So then what Mr. Tate starts to say is that he actually starts to yearn for home. Remember, he's staying in an inpatient setting. Yeah, he yearned for home. So that was communicated to the team. He would like to see his home, a HDB in Choa Chu Kang, yeah, something like that, one last time. Okay, so what happened was the MSW, Samantha, and where is Paul? Paul is here. Okay, Paul is the man inside that went with the patient to the home. So we arranged for transport, and thank God for the way. If you all see the way Paul put his hand, that is how all volunteers in Assisi are trained, to facilitate their movement in a very safe manner. Okay, so Paul and Samantha went with Mr. Tay to his home. Okay, at his home visit on the 14th of October, he will share his photos, his childhood photos with Samantha and Paul. He even showed off his tiger beer glass that he won. Yeah, can you imagine how Mr. Tay is like that? Okay, he lived life fearlessly. Okay, so that is what. Oh, didn't see. Sorry, no wonder I'm the only one who smiled. Okay, so that's what it was like, and that is how all the befriending is like. Can be like for a NODA patient. You really become very intimate, emotionally, cognitively with the patient. So that is what NODA can bring to a volunteer and to a patient. So at the visit at the home, what was very memorable for me is this thing called closing of a chapter. Remember, he basically went home from the inpatient and was coming back to inpatient. And at the home visit, Paul looked on at Mr. Tay. He's a Buddhist. He prayed facing the altar. Can you imagine the HDB flat with that altar? He prayed there. And then Paul helped Mr. Tay put on diapers, change into new clothes, pack some fresh clothes to come back to the hospice. Okay? Some of you might understand what is the significance of the fresh clothes. Okay? And then Paul said, when I asked him which clothes to wear, everything, there was a lot of sadness because of the significance of that chapter, the last visit. Okay? And it is true, this was going to be the last time that Mr. Tay was going to be at home. Okay? So truly, this is what can happen as you journey with a NODA patient. So, Mr. Tay, it was a very emotional visit, okay? But truly, it is always an honor to be able to do that with any patient. And we are very fortunate that we could. And Mr. Tay came back to the inpatient ward, his room, after visiting. And what is the next thing? Is the final lap. Okay? Why the final lap? Because his disease continued. And you can see from the photo, it is horrifying for anyone to experience it. But that is the truth of disease, right? He started to have a lot of deterioration, all right? So he has huge water blisters, and if you understand Hokkien, it says kek sima. Yeah, it's not just the discomfort, it's seeing yourself changing. That is very, very kek sim. And again, as someone who is in the care team, the volunteers who are with the patient, is just to listen and empathize the pain, the discomfort, the shame of being experiencing the disease symptoms. All right. So Mr. Tay got really, really sick. Okay, and he was in his last days. So when that happened, is what we call the vigil activation. We activate a vigil. So on 2nd November, the nurse called the NODA, first responder volunteer, to activate vigil for Mr. Tay. So what happened is that we have very sensitive nurses in Assisi. Okay, they will sense that time is short, vigil needs to be called. And among the NODA volunteers, we actually arrange them into different groups so that there is a responder per group, so it's not so stressful. Because vigil happens any time of the day. In the middle of the night, 3 a.m., 5 a.m., any time. Okay? So, once the vigil is called, okay, the NODA vigil is activated when the estimated hours left is 48 hours. Sometimes they go longer. We have as long as 5 days, but we also have as short as a few hours. All right? So when vigil is activated, the NODA volunteers will log into our volunteer system. Okay, we will have time to share our volunteer mobile app to show how our volunteers start to roster. And every vigil is 3 hours, except for the 12 midnight one, which is up to 6 a.m. That is 6 hours. So you need a couple of volunteers to take turn to do the vigil. So we try to cover the vigil as much as possible by volunteers. There will be times when vigil cannot be covered by a volunteer, but do not fear, okay, we do not fear, because then the nurse will take on that vigil. And when vigil has been activated, what happens next is a meaningful environment. So the volunteer, the NODA volunteer who goes into the room of the patient, at this point in time, Mr. T was unable to speak or open his eyes. But what the NODA volunteer tried to do is to prepare a restful, meaningful environment for Mr. Tay according to his preferences, be it cultural, be it religious. So Mr. Tay is a Buddhist, okay? So what was placed was a candle, a plant, and a laminated Kuan Yin image by his bedside. Buddhist chants were played softly in the background. It comes in because hearing and touch are usually the last senses to go at the end of life. So that is what the volunteer will do upon stepping into that space. And as each volunteer goes in, they just take over by bringing in their healing presence. Okay? So what does the volunteer bring into that space? It's what we call a healing presence. So let me quote Jackie, NODA volunteer. Presence is important, and the concept of being with someone touched me. People don't want to be alone. there are times in my life when I felt lonely, and I don't want others to feel like that, especially when they are dying. So this photo is Jackie next to Mr. Tay. Next, Angela. I often approach the vigil by calming myself. I feel that with my own inner peace and calm, I can bring peace and calm to the dying person and stay present in the moment. Karen said, although Mr. Tay was unconscious, we continued to hold his hands and talk to him to assure him that he was loved and not alone. Lydia, seeing Mr. Tay struggle during the initial hours when the vigil was activated was very painful for me. Mr. Tay was a fighter and taught me to embrace life. I thank him for allowing me to be part of his journey. So this is a vigil moment. I remember we probably did more than 8 hours of vigil for Mr. Tay. I think it was activated the day before, and it ended about 8 something in the morning. Okay? So, but what I want you all to understand is that NODA is not just about the patient, it's also about the volunteer. How the volunteer, the thoughts that go through the volunteer, and also putting the patient first. Okay, but I can also tell you what a NODA volunteer will say is that they learned so much and they got so much more than they expected. And truly, like many patients in Assisi, they all pass on, right? But death is not just death, because when Mr. Tay breathed his last at 8:30 on 4th of November, the NODA volunteer will note the time of last breath drawn, will inform the nurse, but they will also say the personal goodbye to the patient, to Mr. Tay, before they alert the ward nurse. Then they will also update on the mobile app, so the next person may not come down for vigil. The doctor on duty will check and certify the death. That's our process. And then the nurse will perform after-death care. Remember the fresh clothes he brought back? That is probably what he was dressed in. So the nurse will do what she needs to do, the last office. And what happened is that the NODA volunteer can also participate in that process. It is not limited to the nurse. Okay? And usually, the NODA volunteers will wait until the caretaker comes and then depart from the space. After death and care comes the funeral. Yeah? So at the funeral, the social workers is the main contact person, and when possible, they will share what are they will make sure that the funeral cremation arrangements are as per patient's wishes. In Assisi, we do serve a big group of poor patients. We also serve destitutes. So many times, our social workers will see to it that even though the funerals are pro bono, that it is according to the wishes of the deceased. And many of our NODA patients might have very short funerals. Not many people attend the cremation ceremony, and that is when the entire family, the entire Assisi family will come together to attend and send the patient off. So it could be staff, could be volunteers, combination of both, so that there's a good send-off. The thing is, after death, right? So you saw the after death and care, and then you have the cremation. But what happens next? what happened next is very important because in order to sustain the NODA program, we must give sufficient support to the volunteers. All right. So we have interesting closures that importantly are meaningful. So for Mr. Tay is a relatively unique case because remember what he liked? Durian, right? He liked to smoke. He's very proud of his tiger car. Okay, so of course, durian Mount Samwang at $26 per kg was too expensive for us. So what we did was we have a beer session as a closure. Okay, to honor his life, his love for beer, okay, and his zest for life. So that was our after-death party, to put it in a very funny way. All right. Okay. So it's not all just beer, of course. We share about personal memories of Mr. Tay was shared by the volunteers. Okay, and this helped volunteers through their grieving process. Okay, and also one thing we always provide is pastoral care and counseling for volunteers should they find they need it. And that is very, very important. So, so with the cheers, a beer cheer, that's the story of Mr. Tay. I'm very fond of this story because the team really journeyed with Mr. Tay, and he was very, very fun. Then I'll go back to say a bit more about the NODA's journey. As you look at how you could possibly build your own story, let me share with you what is our NODA journey. So NODA started in 2014 with a few very important people like Jackie, who was also a volunteer who was a champion for NODA. And together with the team, we started NODA. So start of NODA at Assisi Volunteer Programme in 2014. And then we start to build. So building is important. So we weren't so ambitious yet. Then we start to build. At that time, 2014, we have 11 NODA volunteers. Then in 2017, that's you see a bit of a growth because we shifted to this building from the old building. From 37 beds, we moved into an 80-bed facility. So the number of patients we have started to grow. So and then what happened is that we had also an expert, Mr. Hendry, who came in to upskill the volunteers in 2017. We increased to 40 NODA volunteers. So remember, 11 to 40. Next, we also, this whole question about home support, we have started to think about it actually in 2017. How do we do NODA at home? We tried to start a pilot, and we are still starting a pilot. Not easy lah, huh? Okay, so remember 2020-21 is COVID time. And for us, what does that mean? We didn't stop NODA during COVID, even during circuit breaker. But it requires us to segregate our volunteers according to wards. So they cannot go from one ward to the other ward. So what does that mean? We actually have to increase the number of volunteers so that the vigil per ward can be well supported. So, and we actually registered them as essential manpower. So what does that mean? For those who are not in healthcare, we actually have to submit this list to the police. So should they be stopped, that they are traveling during circuit breaker, they have a reason why they are on the roads. Okay. And in 2021, we actually developed the mobile app to enhance the communication for NODA beyond WhatsApps. And then, as mentioned, there were patients with limited support. So what you're starting to see is single elderly with a sibling that's even older than him, who struggles to come. Then you will also see maybe a niece supporting many uncles and aunties and have his or her own kid. So support for the patients become more and more challenging. So we started doing co-vigil arrangements with family members. When we first started co-vigil, it was very conflicting. So what we tried to do is open communication with the NODA volunteers and said, we need to do co-vigil. We don't know what will be the next few hours like, but please bear with us while we communicate with the family so that we can support them in the best manner. So, ta-da! We do so much and we are 10 years old! Yay! So, do not fear, because we also started small. Alright? So, and now I'll hand it over to Tianxin to share with you how you can possibly set up NODA in the place that you are thinking about.
Thanks, Juliet. Thanks for the sharing. Okay. Oh, give me a second.
Oh, the mic.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna talk about is the how-to lah. Because why we decided to do this today is because Assisi Hospice has received like on and off, we have a lot of questions from organizations. Hey, we have lonely patients, can you take them in? Or like, oh, we have lonely patients that we wish to serve. How do you start a NODA program? What does it take? Is it very hard, What is required? So since we received so much inquiry, we decided, let's give a talk and share a bit more about how this can be done so that, those who are keen to better support their clients, their beneficiaries, their patients, can have a rough idea of how to proceed from there. Okay? So with this in context, okay, I would like to do a pulse check of our audience. Okay, this does not apply for Assisi staff and volunteers, right? Because what I want to find out is from our partners in the community, minus Assisi Hospice, what stage is NODA within your organizations? Do you have one? Are you keen to start one? Or maybe you have started one and you would like to find out more about how to grow it, So then we can maybe describe a bit more in detail on the portions that matter to you. Okay? Cool. Did y'all manage to go in? Okay. The Mentimeter user code is up there if you didn't manage to scan the QR code. Okay, just to get a sensing of, who's in the group and what you'll like to find out. Okay? Okay, we have quite a couple who is keen to explore. Does anybody have something that is, oh, great, one who's in the planning stage? Sorry, some of you might have issues logging in because I'm using the free account. So capped at 50 participants. But still got space, no worries. Okay, is anybody still trying to get in? Ken? Okay, cool. So I think from the rough numbers that we have so far, we do have a group who are very keen to explore the possibility of NODA. So maybe in the later sharing, I'll focus a bit more in that area then. Okay, sorry, can I just find out, the one that is conceptualization and planning, who is that? Don't paise. Hi, can raise your hands, anybody? Oi. We have very shy audiences. It's okay, no worries. Okay, thanks for taking the trouble to fill in. Okay, the next question, right? The next question is something that I would like you all to put in as and when you all have the time. So I will try to answer it while I'm doing my sharing, or if not, at the end of the sharing, okay? So let's move back to the slides. Okay, how to. Okay, so just now, right, we find that there's quite a few of you who's keen to explore a bit more. Okay, so to start the program, what is needed? Okay, so for us, it's like growing a seed. Okay, for a seed to grow, you need to have the medium. Yeah. So for us, we find that management buy-in is very important. Okay, because to start a program like that, there's a lot of resources that you need. You know, you will need to like have the management support. You will need the support of your colleagues. Yeah, because the colleagues will have to work with the volunteers that you recruit for the program. Okay, so I'm not too sure how it works in other organizations. Do you all have come across instances where your program staff don't trust the volunteers in certain roles? Yes? No? What's the confidence level? Yeah, so I'm sure it differs in all organizations. But for NODA to happen, basically, we would require the direct program staff, depending on what the program is for, to be receptive to work with volunteers. Because the volunteers under the NODA program is actually part of the patient's support system. Yeah? And so they will need to work collaboratively with staff in the defined roles. So buy-in is very important for the project to start well. If not, you will find that it might fizzle off after a while. Okay? Okay, next. Now that we have the support, the management say, yeah, okay, let's go ahead. And because the management is supportive, right? Then when you talk to the program staff, they also, okay lah, management say yes, let's go for it. Yeah? Then we have certain agreement. So what is important next is speak with the stakeholders. Okay? So it is all different in different organizations. So for Assisi Hospice, for us, our stakeholders, because our NODA at Assisi is covering the inpatients primarily. Okay? So in that context, our stakeholders will be like our clinical team, which includes the doctors, the nurses, the medical social worker, the various therapists, allied health professionals, and then, and of course our volunteers as well. Talk with them, find out, work out a process of how NODA patients can be identified. Then after that, what happens? Who makes the decision that this patient is appropriate to be referred to the program? Who does the assessment? And as part of the progress, not only you need to think about like communication flow, we also did risk assessment, because then it's about the integrity of the program, right? We need to think about patient safety, not just physical safety, the emotional safety of the patients. Because not to forget, if patients are lonely, they have no caregiver support, they're in a very vulnerable position. So how do we ensure that the patient's safety is not compromised in this whole program? And then, of course, PDPA is again another thing we need to think about. How much information is shared? What is essential and what is not? So then, based on all these risks that you have identified, what are the mitigating actions that you want to take to minimize such risks? So in Assisi Hospice, for example, to answer the PDPA context, so in our referral, the medical social worker will outline the profile of the patient so that we know who we are dealing with, right? But they will provide enough context so that the volunteer know who they are befriending, have a rough understanding of what kind of a person and why this person is on NODA. But what will not be covered, okay, is the medical condition, the details of the medical condition, because we do not need to know that in befriending and caring for the patient. Yeah? So only necessary information is shared, enough so that the volunteer can support the patient, but nothing more than that. Okay? Okay. So for all these things, I will keep it very informal because it's a how-to, right? So if at every section, I will ask for questions. so that you don't need to wait until the end in case you forget your questions. Okay? So at any point of time, if you have a burning question that you really need to ask at this point of time, raise your hand, and if it's appropriate, I will call upon you. Can? Okay? Okay, so after you work out the process, right? Okay, who identify, what happens, what happened. Okay, then after that, is for us to scope the NODA role. What do we need the volunteer to do? What kind of personality should the person have to make sure that she's appropriate for that role, And then, after we know who we are looking for already, then we think about, okay, let's go out and find that person that we need for the program. So then we need to think about how do we recruit volunteers. Do we go out to the public and ask people to register? Do we look at whatever internal resources we have? Yeah. And how do we screen that they have the qualities that we want? You don't want to call, and then actually out of 100 people, 95% not suitable, right? How do we screen to make sure that they're the right people that we want? Okay? So after you have selected your volunteers, okay, then you probably need to train them in the roles that they will need to do. Certain skill sets they may already have, but there might be other roles and responsibilities that they will need to do as part of the NODA program that may not be so familiar. So training is important. Okay? So at this point of time, burning questions? Anyone? Yes?
So you talk a lot about...
Lai Lai.
Thanks so much. You spoke about the type of volunteers you're looking for. So by now, we do have the qualities, made to be a good NODA volunteer.
Qualities, okay. Good question. Because you read my mind, that's my next slide. Okay, so I can only say what applies for Assisi Hospice, okay, because for each and every different organization, your service needs are very different. So you might require a different type of volunteer than us for the program. Okay? Oh, before I go into the volunteers, one last thing. Program tracking is very important. Okay? I cannot emphasize that enough. You need to track the program because when you start the program, right, you will need to know what are the objectives that the program will need to achieve. So in order to kind of gauge the program is doing well, not so well, you need numbers that you want to match. Yeah, my boss is laughing because she always asks me about impact reports. Yeah. So program tracking is very important so that you know how well your program is going, whether or not to proceed, whether there are any gaps, okay? So that's why I put it in the very beginning. This is something you need to look at. Okay, so questions from Tan about volunteer. Okay, so we'll talk about volunteer scoping, recruitment, and screening all in one slide. Okay, so for Assisi Hospice, okay, we are talking about inpatient, right? So based on the journey that Juliet has shared just now, Mr. Tay, when he comes in, our volunteer would, start befriending him if the patient is still well enough for interaction and stuff. So then, the person will need to provide companionship. Because when a person lays dying and as part of the NODA program, right, it is always nice that the person keeping you company is somebody that you're familiar with, somebody you have a relationship already. So since they have no family, we try and build that relationship between our volunteers and the patient so that eventually when they vigil with our patients in the end, it is not with a stranger. It is with a volunteer that you have connected with and spoken to during your time here. Yeah? Where that is possible. Okay, I have to caveat that sometimes the NODA patients are referred at quite a late stage. By that time, they may not be communicable. So then that companionship portion might more be like silent support, so that, yeah. Okay? Then, because they are in the inpatient care, the patient condition will deteriorate. So we felt that it is important that our volunteers can also help our nurses in patient care support. Yeah? Because at the very end, when you're journeying with the patient, it helps that you also help our nurses in patient care roles as well. So sometimes it is helping to change the patient's diapers, bed sponging. Of course, those things are always done in the presence of a nurse, okay? And sometimes even feeding them their meals could be an opportunity to build a connection, okay? So patient care support is important. And from what Juliet shared about Mr. Tay, right, bringing him downstairs to the koi pond to smoke is important to him. Yeah, so part of patient care support is making sure that our volunteers know how to use the wheelchair for the safety of patients, what to look at because, yeah, what to look out for. And last but not least is vigiling. When the patient is in the last 48 hours of their life, what do you need to stay present with the patient so that he does not feel alone at that point of time? Yeah. Dying is quite scary, right? Have you all ever thought of what happens? Yeah. For everyone, it's the first time, right? We all don't know what's going to happen. So, yeah, it's quite a scary thing to do, lah. So, I guess for most people, it's nice to have somebody to journey with you on this last stage. Okay, so that is some of the roles and responsibilities that we want our volunteers to have. Okay, then we think about, yeah, not everybody is suitable. So some of the traits that we felt our NODA volunteers should have is we need to ensure that they're committed. Because in the inpatient ward, although the criteria for admission is 3 months, right? On average, our inpatients stay about 20 days. Yeah, so that's slightly less than 3 weeks. So you can imagine, if you want to build a relationship by befriending patient, sometimes you only have 20 days or less to do that companionship. If you only come once a month, basically the patient will only see you 1 time. You know, then very hard to build relationship, right? So it's more ideal if the volunteer is committed. So I will see many of our NODA volunteers are those who come like weekly or every 2 weeks, and sometimes even more than once a week. Yep. So this is something we felt is important. And of course, you have to be patient-centric. Yeah. I have, sometimes I get public inquiry. I want to join the NODA program. Oh, then I'll ask, oh, okay, that's nice. Why do you want to do it? Oh, I find it fulfilling. I find that, I want to preach to patients before they die and save their souls. Okay. So, sorry. So, although we are a Catholic organization, one of the things that we do not do and we do not allow our volunteers to do is to evangelize. So, sometimes we will find out a bit more about the volunteers' motivation. Why do you do certain things? Because at the end of the day, we have to remember, NODA program is us supporting the patient in what they need. It is not so much of what we need. Okay, so if you come with the agenda, I need to achieve certain KPI, in terms of evangelization, then do you consider what is our patients' needs? Because our patients, although we are Catholic organizations, our patients are from all faith and religion. Yeah, so if that is not the patient's need, then that should not be your focus. So it's important to find somebody who sees the patient first. Oh, sorry. And of course, because NODA is a team, right? One person cannot be vigiling for everyone. So it's important that we work well as a team, we respect one another. And it's not just team of volunteers, it's the multidisciplinary team of Assisi Hospice. Yeah, so that's what we call Team Assisi. We are part of that ecosystem to support the patients, and we need to respect each other and work together. And also respecting boundaries of your role, of your relationship with patients. Okay, so in journeying with patients, you build relationships. And I would say especially true for the NODA program, because you're befriending somebody who does not have anyone else. So sometimes you build such a deep connection, you feel that you are part of his family, which is something that we try and create. But sometimes when you are too close to somebody, certain boundaries, certain things get very blurred. Certain things that volunteers are not allowed to do, you feel that, but this one's so poor thing, I feel that I can do this extra for him. Some of these things may be appropriate, some of these things may not be appropriate, So we need volunteers who can come, sometimes like step back and be aware of what are the boundaries for this role so that patient and volunteer safety is not compromised. Okay, and of course, we feel that because of that close connection, we need the volunteer to have good emotional coping. Okay, because you journey so closely, right? When the patient eventually passes away, sometimes volunteers might feel the loss as deep as somebody who's your loved one has passed on. You know, so it's about then how do you cope with it and process it internally so that you can refresh yourself to care for the next patient. If not, you can imagine with every patient you get close to, they pass away and the grief is not processed properly, it accumulates and it brings you down. So we need to make sure that this volunteer has good emotional coping so that he can sustain themselves in the program, because we care for so many NODA patients. Okay? Okay. Yes?
This emotional coping.
Yeah. Come.
Regarding this emotional coping, do you provide counseling for the compassion fatigue part of the volunteers?
Okay, so for us, right, there are quite a few things that we do for the emotional coping thing. So like what Juliet mentioned, our volunteers know that the VM team is always available to talk about it. We also have counseling support if the volunteer decides that that is more appropriate to help them process the grief. But what we also do is sometimes we have like little support system, whether it is the volunteer management team or whether it is amongst the NODA volunteers themselves. Because amongst the NODA volunteers themselves, we also have leads for the ward. So the experienced volunteers sometimes after a passing, especially a patient whom we have journeyed very closely with pass on, you will see that the experienced volunteers will check in on the younger ones to help them process, understand, you know, talk about it. Sometimes talking about it helps. And everybody process their grief differently, which is why as part of our volunteer program, self-care is actually an important component. So they are taught, you know, because not only for NODA volunteers, even for general volunteers volunteering in the ward, volunteering in the daycare, you build relationship with patients. And a hospice is an environment where patients eventually will pass on. So it is not just a prerogative of NODA volunteer. All our volunteers are trained in self-care and how to process, and all of them know that if there is any additional help in terms of psychosocial support, they can always come to us, or if not the VM team, then our counselors can come into play to help support them. And sometimes for different people, talking about it is important. Sometimes it's how they deal with it personally. I have friends who tell me, oh, you know, after each patient pass on, I will go to church and say a prayer for them. This is how they process their grief. Yeah. And other people might be, okay, I will go for a walk and then I will think about the patient on my journey, and I thank them for allowing me to be part of this journey. So everybody processes differently. So we hope with this variety of different levels of support system, our volunteers will be able to cope. Okay, so then how we find these people, you know? Okay, so now then we'll look where. Okay, so looking at the roles and responsibility, right? Companionship and patient care support. Okay. Sorry? Yes. Question.
Just because there's patient care support, right? And relationship building, you mentioned so much about. When you assign or when you assign volunteers to patients, do you give consideration to the gender difference?
Okay, so when we say a patient goes on the NODA program, right, it is more in the sense that a patient comes on the NODA program and all the NODA volunteers as a whole comes in as a team to support this patient. So it is not a case of, okay, this patient, then I will assign one particular volunteer to befriend and stuff. Yeah, that's not how it works. So as a team, we will do the befriending because everybody connects differently. You know, maybe volunteer A might form a better connection with patient B, you know, but maybe another volunteer, they cannot connect as well. So sometimes it's about preferences and 缘分啦, you know. So as a team, we'll befriend, and eventually the patient will probably find volunteers that they are closer with. Yeah, but for the patient care support portion, as part of volunteer training, for male volunteer carers, Then there's the gender distinction. They can only do patient care for male patients. Yeah? But for female volunteer carers, they can care for both genders. Yeah, and they are trained to do that. Okay, I hope that kind of answers your question. Okay? Okay, so for the first two roles and responsibility, we found that, hey, actually we do have already pool of these people in our inpatient volunteer carer. Okay? Because these are the volunteers that come in and they are trained in communication skills from our medical social workers. So they are trained in how to interact with patients, what are the verbal, non-verbal communication, if patient asks awkward questions, sensitive things, how do I react? So they are trained to respond appropriately in the interactions. And they are also trained by our nursing educator on the clinical skills that's required, like patient care, how to support the nurses when they do diaper changing, so on and so forth. Okay, so that one is all taught. And they are also have training in volunteer guidelines. So we have certain guidelines that we expect all volunteers to follow. So that includes respecting religion, no evangelization, no exchange of contact numbers, so on and so forth. And self-care definitely, yep. So this is then a pool that is kind of fulfill the first two conditions. Okay, then we look at traits. Then how do we find people who has these traits? Okay, then we think, okay, then we have got to add another layer, right? To sieve out those who are suitable, right? So, okay, that's why for the NODA program, we do require that the volunteers serve at least 4 consecutive months as an inpatient volunteer carer. Okay, so in these 4 months, what the VM team do is we assess the volunteers. We look at how they do their volunteering duty. Do they come regularly or they come once every 3 months? Then that is the commitment portion and regularity, right? Then you think about how they perform their duty. Is it more of what they want versus what patient wants? Their priorities in the care. And then do they work well as a team, or I just do my own thing, I don't care about other people, I just want to do my own stuff. Yeah, and how they cope emotionally when patients pass on. In 4 months, they would have encountered a passing here and there. So how do they cope? Are they very, very sad and brought down every time a patient passes on? So this is how we gauge. Yeah. And we do require that NODA volunteers are 30 years old and above. So this is again, we felt that older, not say older, 30 very young, but more matured people usually have a better emotional coping compared to, because our minimum age is 17 years old for volunteer carers. So a 17-year-old may not have the emotional maturity to cope with death and grieving as well as an adult who has more life experience. Yeah, so that's the rationale. And of course, after we have kind of shortlisted, so the VM team will kind of look at the volunteer pool that we have. And sometimes it's about volunteers coming in to say, hey, I'm keen on the NODA program. Then during that time, we'll assess their traits, their suitability. Then if we feel, okay, agak can meet the requirements, then we will do an interview screening. We'll have a quick chat, in these circumstances, what do you feel, how do you cope, stuff like that, to kind of ascertain that they are right for the program. Yeah? And then, okay, all the blue one we have already, right? So, vigiling. Okay, so this is the one last skill that we have not found. So then we layer in, put it part of the program. So after they pass everything already, then we will train them in this additional skill which most people currently may not have. Okay, cool. So that is, but that said, we don't just take from our own pool. So for example, when we get public inquiries and they say, oh, I'm very touched by the program, I want to do my part, I want to serve patients. Yeah. We do not reject because you're from the public, but we will also tell them, these are all the requirements. So we will require you to serve as part of our volunteer carer team for at least 4 months so that we can assess and ascertain that, you are appropriate for the program. Okay, so we will refer them to join our general volunteer carer role first. Okay, then we talk about training and onboarding. Okay, just now we talk about the scoping, the process, how we select the volunteers, right? Then it's about how do you then train these volunteers so that they are prepared and equipped with the necessary skill to support our patients in the way that we would like them to. Okay, so in general, our training outline include, of course, you must tell them about the program, what they're expected to do, right? Although when they sign up, they will roughly know, but it's always good to reiterate, what is your responsibility so that they bear that in mind. And of course, share with them the NODA process. Back end, how does it work? How does the referral come? What should we do as part of the training, as part of your befriending? If you find out things that are important to the patient, how do you share with the rest of the NODA team? That is Juliet's information about updating the team as well, right, on patients' preferences and stuff. Okay, what it looks like and what you can do. And then, of course, communications. When vigil is called, how would you receive the notification? How do you sign up? How do we communicate? And of course, we train them in vigiling skills. How do you prepare yourself before you go into the vigil? You ground yourself, forget about everything else, and go in so that you are present with the patient. You are not bogged down by what happened this afternoon. I'm stressed about my meeting tomorrow. I have an important email I need to reply. No, put all this aside when you go into vigil so that it's really you and the patient spending time together. Then it's meaningful for both the volunteer and the patient. Okay? Then also when the patient eventually passes on, what you can do as a volunteer to complete that journey with the NODA patient. And of course, self-care is again emphasized because we need our volunteer to care for, basically, we all need to care for ourselves before we can care for somebody else. If not, it's not sustainable. And then we will also let them know, okay, then there is more administrative. If you need pastoral support, where do you find it? If you come in the middle of the night and you don't have a car, you need to take a Grab, how do you do reimbursement? Yeah, refreshments, where to get, so on and so forth. Yeah, after training, then what? We just throw them to see if a patient we are dying. No, right? Then of course we need to ease them in because what you learn during training is very different from what happens on the ground, right? Yeah, then usually for newly trained NODA volunteers, we would tell them they can kind of like join in one of the visuals that already has an experienced volunteer so that they can look-see first, and see what happens on the ground. So that is kind of like an onboarding, so that in case got any question, then the experienced volunteer can guide the new one along. Yeah? Okay? Questions so far? Don't have? Oh, sorry, yes.
Regarding the PDPA,
听不到你要
hello. Regarding the PDPA information of your patient. So let's say we take it as within the staff, we share information is quite okay, but how about volunteers? Sharing among the volunteers. How we manage it?
Okay, so for Assisi Hospice, right, it's, okay, what you say is true and not true at the same time. So you said among staff, you can share information, but even among staff, not everybody needs to know everything about the patient. So for example, what the nurses and the doctor know about the patient's medical condition, the volunteer management team doesn't need to know because it is not essential to what we do to help the patient. So even our VM team, although we are staff, we are not privy to patients' records. So in that sense, even amongst volunteers, what they share, so we always, as part of the training, we'll emphasize, what you share has to be relevant in how the team supports the patient, So then it's about, what is appropriate and what is not, which is kind of like taught in the training, like, a medical condition, this, that, yeah. But if it is not important to how the team cares for the patient, then it's not relevant information you need to share. Yeah. But if it is important, like, they like certain things, I enjoy certain things, and it will help improve the patient's quality of life, which is what we are looking for, then sure. Like, he likes durian, bringing me a bit of durian make his day a bit brighter, yeah. And things that are relevant, okay? Okay, so for those who are looking, sorry.
Because the NODA supports people who have no family and no close friends. So it's truly alone. How do you deal with LPA and dealing with the person's, personal things?
Because you're looking until he dies.
Okay, so for the NODA program, right, we do deal with patients who are lonely, who have no family or friends. But remember, we support the patient as an entire hospice team, multidisciplinary. So that includes doctor, nurses who take care of their medical needs. We have the volunteers who provide the companionship, the patient care support, the vigil. We also have a medical social worker who will work with the patients on things like LPA, you know, what are their wishes, their funeral, you know, yeah, what they want to. That's why the communication portion is very important. Who does what, so that we don't kind of like overlap in areas that are not within our purview. So what you're asking, the LPA portion is not within the volunteer's purview. So if there is a conversation that the patient brings up in the presence of a volunteer, then the appropriate response will be, okay, I will inform the staff so that the medical social worker can explore a bit more with you. Yeah, it is not for them to make a comment. Huh? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm a bit blind.
In line with the LPA, will Assisi actually take up the role as professional donor in those patients that are alone, no family, no relatives?
Okay, that one is a question that my psychosocial team will have to answer. Yeah. The LPA portion, does Assisi Hospice undertake to help them? Huh? Professional donor.
For those are alone, no family, no.
Okay, maybe this one is a question that I have to explore with you further after the session. So if need be, we can check with our psychosocial team. Yeah, sorry, it is not a question that I can answer at this point of time. Yes.
LPA is a legal thing, so this is a volunteer, there's no conflict. And also professional donors, if it's a destitute or nothing, they are actually appointed by government. So no conflict.
Yeah, so not volunteer related lah. Thank you so much. Okay, so for those who maybe, any other question before we go on? Because I realize we are running out a bit of time. Okay, maybe if not, then we will continue on. Then at the end of it, if we have time, then we can do more questions. Okay? So, anybody feeling inspired to start one right now? Can lah. Okay, so there is a lot of collaboration that's needed, but not impossible. Okay, step by step. Okay, so if you all really start one, okay, like Juliet mentioned, start small. Don't kill yourself. Okay, yeah. Start small to test, maybe small group of patients, small group of volunteers, to test out the process that you have kind of like worked out with your stakeholders. It's like testing, you know, does it make sense? Will it work? Yeah. So for Assisi Hospice, from what Juliet shared earlier, for the first year, we only dealt with 4 patients with 11 volunteers, and that's all we do. We test, and then we review, and then we improve. Okay? 1 year is usually a good time for a pilot, so for you to gauge whether certain things need to be changed or not. Okay, it's important to get feedback. Okay, feedback not just from the volunteers. You need to ask your stakeholders that work with you. Hey, does this work? Does it work for you? Are there any areas that you feel could be improved on? You know, are there certain risks that we have not anticipated but cropped out during the pilot? Think about it. Get all this feedback. Okay, and then we evaluate. You know. Okay, get all this feedback. Hey, actually, this is something that we have not anticipated. Then how? What is the risk? Is there a risk? How do you mitigate it? Yeah, and maybe, hey, what worked well? Well, this part really good, you know. Then we can see how we can expand that. Yeah, so you review and then you fine tune and improve the program along the way. But start small, okay? So that if you need to change, you don't need to change and on a big scale. Okay, then maybe you start already, program stabilize after 2 or 3 years, and think about, okay, what more can I do? Getting a bit more ambitious already, right? We are doing well. Okay, so to grow the program, so for Assisi Hospice, from the timeline that Juliet has shared, right? You see, in 2014, we dealt with 4. But when 2017, we changed to the new building, suddenly, the number of patients that we serve grew. That means the number of lonely patients we carry is also more. That's when we decided, we need to increase capacity. 11 cannot beside, So we do active volunteer recruitment. Yeah, and then sometimes in the 2-3 years, volunteers' life circumstance might have changed. You know, suddenly, from her housewife, I suddenly decided I want to go to work. I don't have the time to be so regular anymore. Volunteers might drop off along the way. We need to think about renewal, you know, so that the team, we constantly have a big enough number to support the patients that we have. Okay? Yeah, and then also in 2017, because we get feedback from the volunteers, you know, I think we are doing quite well in supporting patients, but there's a lot of things that we think we can still learn, you know, which is what prompted the expert series where we invited Mr. Henry Fusco-Vice to come in and equip our volunteers with vigiling skills so that they can better support our patients. So then our volunteers learn about visualizations, about, you know, things that will help them in their journey with patients. Yeah, then again, you continue to evaluate the program to enhance it. Okay, then it is at this stage where you need to think also about engagement and retention. Because after doing things repeatedly, so on and so forth, after so long, you need to continually engage with the volunteers to have a sensing of what they feel, you know. Are they still getting satisfaction from what they are doing? Do they find meaning in their role, you know? And that helps in the retention of people in the program. If not, they see it already, they feel, you know, I do so much for you, you don't appreciate me at all. Forget it, I go and do something else. Yeah. Okay, so then volunteer support is very important. Yeah, like we mentioned, if they are always so bogged down by grief every time a patient dies, then emotionally they cannot sustain themselves also. They will drop out from the program. So, yeah. So this is the step 2. Okay, if you find that the program has stabilized and you want to build a bit more. Okay, then grow, number become bigger and bigger. We are serving more and more patients, right? Well and good. Then we may think of, what else can we do? Okay, so so for Assisi Hospice, every year we do impact reporting on our various programs, NODA being one of them, and that is about always identifying what are the gaps that we currently have in the program. Do we have enough patients to serve? You know, the process, is there something we can improve on, or opportunities like 2017 we thought, maybe after doing inpatient, we can also extend that to home care. Okay, so but that's another story altogether. We have a process in place already for NODA at home, but maybe the need is not so much there, so that portion has not been active so far. Yeah. Then for Assisi Hospice, every year we do the stats reporting and stuff, right? Then we realize, sometimes visual very long. Okay, so visual means when we try to cover 24/7, right? It means even at night, you know, from 12 to 6. So when you have a visual that takes place for 5 days, it takes a toll on the volunteers. You know, they come in, come out, stay, especially for the night ones. Then we think about what can we do. So what we did was we worked with the clinical team to so that we can make the 48 hours prognosis more accurate. So that when that one is more accurate, that means more soon on when the patient is going to pass on. Then that shortens the visual and the stress on the NODA team as well in terms of supporting. Yeah. Then because we are also developing, enhancing our volunteer management system, so we try and make the volunteer app mobile friendly. Because nowadays people are all on the go, right? How can it be roster? You need to find a laptop, then you can roster. No, everything is on the phone now. So we try and make it mobile friendly. And as part of this development, we added in the NODA app, a NODA module to this app. So initially we didn't have that in the system, so we added that as part of the enhancement. And from there, it allows the NODA volunteers to roster themselves more efficiently, and it's also a consolidated database on information that they share about the patient with the rest of the team. Yeah, when we first started, it was very basic. WhatsApp group. No, when you vigil, then you add, then you got to copy and paste, then put your name down, copy and paste. We have moved on from that Okay, but that is many years after we started. Okay, if technology is something you can consider, and of course, we don't know what we don't know, right? We might think we are doing so well, but maybe there are other people who have something special about the program that we can learn from. So that's why sharing is very important. So we always welcome feedback and opportunities to collaborate and share, so which is actually also why we have this session, so that we can share with all of you, and maybe you all have some inspirational or some ideas that you can share with us on how the program can be evolved, and we all learn together. Okay? So yeah, so this is part of the analysis on the patient and program analysis that we do. So for example, we even, besides like how many patients lah, how long the vigil is lah, we also look at things like, you know, are we achieving our objective of accompanying patients till their last breath? Because that is what NODA essentially is, right? So then we track who is the last person that the patient is next to the patient when the patient draws his last breath. Okay, so we discovered in 2022, yeah lah, majority of the time is NODA volunteer. Okay, so that is 47%. But out of this group, actually 34% is co-vigil with the family members. They have limited support, so we take turn lah. We have a schedule, and it just happened that at the point of time when they pass on, is a family member, which is good, I guess, because it's better, right, that the family is with them when they pass. So that's ideal, so no problem with that. Okay, we have a small number that, maybe they come on part of NODA, but their condition stabilized while they're here, so they're discharged and out of the program, which is not a bad thing too. And there are these small 14% where really no volunteer are available to vigil, and family and friends also not around. So this is where our colleagues step in. Our nurses will step in and help to cover those shifts that volunteers are not able to cover, so that the patient essentially still not alone lah. Yeah, so they will check in very frequently. Sometimes they'll sit with them if they have time amidst their work. Yeah, and we also found that, you know, in this small percentage, sometimes it's by nurse, it's because the condition deteriorates so fast. The NODA volunteer can have signed up, but patient die before volunteer can reach. So because the nurse know that they're dying, right? So naturally the nurses will be around, but the patient die before the volunteer can come, which is why, yeah, that falls under the nurse, last companion for last breath. So, but from this, we also realize, see, yeah, actually the trend, we see a growing trend in amongst our NODA patients. You know, previously was a lot, really no family, no friends one. But these few years we see, we need to do a lot of co-vigil, which in itself adds a layer of complexity to the care. Because when there are no family or friends, our communications is very easy, right? Amongst our team, amongst Assisi, it's all internal. But when you throw in like estranged family members coming in, you know, sometimes where possible, our medical social worker will try and work out a visual schedule so that everybody knows when to come in. But you have a lot of suddenly estranged families suddenly appearing from the woodworks and come and stay for long periods. Then my volunteer come for duty and say, but got family member there. Like, then they make a wasted trip. Especially for late nights, they rush down and then find that actually their services are not needed. So then that adds a bit of complexity to the care that we provide for the patient. But as always, we try and work things out with our colleagues, with the different multidisciplinary team people, so that the program can continue to sustain patients in the atmosphere that it is in now. Okay, I think I'm on my last slide. Okay, now we can take more questions. We have like 10 more minutes. Mentee, oh, okay. Sorry, I promised I will look at Mentee, but I forgot. Funding, 那个是不是 community foundation 的? Okay, for this part of the questions, I will invite Juliet to come and take the questions with me. Okay.
We're open to all type of questions, so I will address the first question. The funding for the app development, we actually tap on some of the digital funding that is available. So we have good colleagues that is in the IT sector. The IT folks basically will streamline all the funding that is available given by the government for digital innovations for not-for-profit. So that is one fund that we tapped on. So you all can also look at that.
Any other question? Oh, 等一下，没有了，等一下。Cannot see 嘞。
Cannot see. Okay. So is there any other questions that you all would like to ask about the program? Yes?
What's the budget for the year?
Budget for what? For this program? Okay, we don't specifically, okay, so the question is, what is the budget for NODA program? In Assisi, NODA is a subset of our full volunteer program. Alright, so our full volunteer program, we are looking at 150 volunteers per month who contribute close to 18,000 hours of patient care. Okay, so we have 3 headcounts, three full FTEs that support the program. I've shared before in, I think, the one session together with Alexandra Health. So I think Dr. Noreen was very surprised by the manpower we actually put behind volunteer program because of the amount of activities that we have for the patient among the volunteers. So the size of 3 headcounts support that volume, plus we do a lot of training we do once a month volunteer training for new volunteers. And also, because we are healthcare, we have a lot of proficiency requirement. That means all the volunteers need to be PPE competent. And just after COVID, all volunteers need to be fitted with N95 mask. So that was the history of healthcare after COVID. So the amount of work that is on the volunteer team differ, but for healthcare, because of COVID, it ramped up tremendously. Okay, yes? What anybody can do. Number 1 is number of patients served. Alright? So if you go back to that number, the other number we look at is the number of virtual hours. So how many hours do we actually do virtual? Okay, and we want to track the trend, we want to see the load on the volunteers. So, okay, I think we didn't have number of patients. Okay, so that on top are the number of patients that we serve on an annual basis. If the numbers jump very high, we get a bit chua, huh? Okay, but truly the need is great. So like the one in 2021, the 51, that can be explained because of the COVID measures. Less people could enter, so support was needed. So that is one impact number. Number of patients, number of virtual hours. Number of virtual hours is in our other reports, in our annual report you can find that. Then what TNC had shared is the person who is the companion at the last hour. So we want to reduce, for example, the number of the 40%. That is part of program improvement. We want to reduce nurses doing the visual, for example. So that will be the effectiveness that we want to see. Yeah.
Follow-on question to that. So are there patients who get turned away? Applicants for the program who get turned away, and would you know what happens to them if should they get turned away?
I think for us, we generally don't turn away most patients. So we don't turn away in the sense that we reject them outright. So before they even get referred, the team would have already known the requirements for NODA patients. So they would then recommend appropriate patients to us. So in that sense, most of them fit the criteria except for 1 or 2, which sometimes the BM team will have to call, hey, from the background that you provide us, like for family support, then why do you need to put him on NODA? Then there will be this clarification on why they need. But sometimes we may not accept the referral immediately, maybe because at that point of time, we already have many NODA patients and a lot of vigils going on. So in that sense, it doesn't make, then maybe if the referral for this patient is like actually very stable, then in that sense, we might hold off KIV. That means at this point of time, our team is a bit overloaded, we cannot take in a new patient, but I'm not saying no. So when patients eventually pass on, the load becomes a bit more manageable, then we take in that referral so that, yeah, because no point taking in and then nobody going in, right? So that doesn't make sense, yeah. So we don't generally turn away, but maybe we may not accept immediately because we need certain clarification, or maybe it's in the load, the current load might be too much to hold, yeah. Because sometimes when holding like 5 or 6 NODA patients, right, sometimes very soon, you have 3 vigils all at the same time, then what happens? Yeah. So we are mindful of that as well, not to overtax our volunteers. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, great.
Your NODA at home, I know you said you have a program but not yet quite active. But are you serving only patients who are registered with Assisi Hospice and discharge home, or are you open to generally the public?
Answer that. So for NODA at home, okay, it was actually a service extended to Assisi home care patients. Assisi have over, on an annual basis, more than 1,000 home care patients. At any one time, it's 600. Okay, so it is a big segment group that we want to serve, but when it comes to this area, number one, we definitely will start off like all pilot. We always start with our own, and we always start small. So we are still working with the PSS, our social workers, to visit this area of need, because it is really not simple, and our volunteers need to be properly equipped to do it in a safe manner. Okay. The thing is, in Singapore, as of now, home care patients have family members. Yeah. So let's see. The truth of the matter about our community is that you're going to have a lot of single home care patients staying alone. So we are still working to see how we can help the community. But definitely on the pilot, only Assisi home care patients. Okay. Hope that answers your question. And there's another question over there.
For patients without mental capacity, like maybe they have dementia and other life-limiting illness, can they be enrolled into NODA? And how do you manage this? Because you mentioned that you need to make consent from them to enroll them. Yeah. So, okay, to answer your questions about patients who have no mental capacity, right? Then that will involve a bit more work on the part of our psychosocial team, because then it depends on whether the patient is a loner or have family members. So if they have family members, then naturally we will get the patient's preference from their main spokesperson, which we call MSP. Yeah, then we learn a bit more about their preferences, what the family member feels like the patients would want, what would be important to the patient, and we try and honor that. But if the patient is a loner, for example, somebody who's referred in from like destitute home, then our medical social worker sometimes will then get into contact with the medical social worker on the side of the destitute home to find out a bit more about the patient, to find out, before they become mentally incapable, what is he like as a person? What does he enjoy doing? What is important to him? So that with the information, where relevant, they will share with the NODA team, and we will try and care for them as much as we can. Yeah, but that's it. Sometimes it is really a black hole, Then maybe the medical social worker on the part of the destitute home will tell you, he come already like that and he has been 10 years. Sometimes life is like that, right? And we cannot track that all the way. So what we can say is we try where possible, but sometimes in limited areas we cannot. But in that sense, then we will try our best to care for him in a way as best as we can. Sometimes it's about observation. So we had a patient who comes in, who came in, so that is not specifically NODA, who cannot speak, okay? We don't have the background of what he enjoys. She enjoyed or not, and cannot express herself properly. So, but what the nurses and the volunteers do is they observe her responses to certain things. they will realize that, hey, this patient has a bit of a nervous scratching herself, bleeding, when she's very unsettled. But then they also observe that, hey, sometimes if they can hear outside, got things happening, got people talking, people moving, she calms down. That means she is a bit scared of being alone. So what happens is then the volunteers and the nurses will then, play soft music in the ward. So when she hears music, when she hears activity going on, then she calms down. So sometimes, if you don't have background information, then we observe what the patient's responses are, and we try and care for him or her as best as we can. Yeah. Okay. We good? Okay. I think if you have any other questions, right? What I can put is we will share our email. Okay. Then this will be very fun. We will share our email so that if you have any other questions, you need to maybe you have convinced your management to commit to a NODA program in your organization and you would like to find out more. Yeah, please feel free to contact us. Okay. On the last slide is the contact email for Juliet and myself. So if you have any questions outside of this lecture, feel free to give us an email, drop an email, send us a call. Okay? Okay. Thank you everyone for being so patient. Thank you. Okay. We hope you have found this session insightful. If you're going to start something, do let us know, okay? We are really, we would like to know that hopefully today has seeded some inspiration on the ground so that we can extend the care to other people. Thank you very much.